the Python Software Foundation runs a fundraising and membership drive. I think they do one of these more than once a year, but the winter one tends to be kind of a big focus, in part because a lot of people's uh, budgets are kind of wrapping up around this time of year, and especially with the PSF being a 501c3, right? You get into things like charitable donation budgets and all of this other stuff. But the long and short of it is that the PSF is running a drive right now, asking people to do two things. One is to support the PSF financially, right? And you could do this a few different ways, but the sort of biggest um, direct impact one is going to be to donate, and whether that's your own individual funds, or if you work at a company that supports organizations like this, corporate donations as well. And then the other is actually becoming a member of the Python Software Foundation, um, which there are a bunch of different kinds of membership. The one that's most relevant here is the supporting member, which is the membership class that is tied to, right. If you do make regular financial donations to the PSF, um, you get yourself added to the membership roster, which comes with a bunch of things. The kind of main one, though, is the ability to vote in Python Software Foundation board elections.
It's not just that, like, oh, hey, I'm a member, I'm giving money. It's I'm a member, I'm giving money, and I get things back that actively support the Python community. Like they talk about it kind of in the little slide in the page here. You have, like, PyCon US, the developer in residence program, actually having people on staff to look after the Python community, the infrastructure that goes into it all. Like, your $100 that you give goes towards that, and that's kind of the minimum I think you can give for the supporting membership thing. But, like, think about how much money people make and think about all these things that you can do. Like, do those things, because it keeps like all of these things running smoothly.
There are a handful of different kind of specific initiatives that they highlight here in this fundraising announcement, but the PSF does quite a bit. Right, the biggest one that people know of, and is probably the most visible, is right. They're the organization that makes PyCon US possible. Right, PyCon US is a big event, and we've talked about it a bunch of times. Right, the call for proposals is open, and it's almost a year round kind of topic, just because of how involved it all is. And obviously for the people behind the scenes, it's more than a year round commitment. Um, but if you've ever been to a Python related event, there's a really good chance the Python Software Foundation has been um, kind of involved in making that happen in one way or another. Right, they provide grants to other organizations. There are benefits like the fiscal sponsorship program. So if you run an event, or an open source project, right, you can get some of the benefits of being right under a 501c3 without having to do all of that legal work yourself. There are a bunch of ways right now to make your dollars go further, right? If you're interested in supporting them, a really big one, I mentioned before. If you work for a company that uses Python, um, if they have a charitable giving initiative, or if they do, a lot of companies do these things like they will match to to some cap um, charitable donations that their employees make. You can double the impact of your donation here, or right if you're going to buy charm anyway, like you said, do it around this time. Now you can have the added bonus of supporting the PSF.
I always forget about that like donation matching thing of like, oh hey, if you go through the process, you can turn your $100 donation into $200 donation, and it still only costs you $100. Like that's great. I've been to one PyCon in my career, and it was fantastic and phenomenal, and I can't wait to go again next year. It is not cheap for people to go to PyCon, and many people are only able to go because their employers will pay for them to go. That being said, I know of people who got their first job because they went to PyCon. I know of people who got their first job because they went to some other conference. I know of people whose first time ever getting on stage and giving a lightning talk was because someone gave them the encouragement to sign up and do that thing at PyCon. That is career changing for a lot of people. That is more career changing than sending a tweet or any of those things. So if you want to support more people doing that, your money, your donation actually goes in some ways towards providing those sponsorships and scholarships to attend some of these events. My first conference, well, my second conference that I ever went to, I only had to pay for my conference ticket. My flight and my hotel were covered. And the only reason I was able to do that was because not not due to the sponsorships of the event, but due to the sponsorships of the PSF, who were then also providing those grants to that smaller conference. So like when you invest that little bit of money, sure it goes to all of those things, but it might down the road go and impact somebody attending their first conference, not even in Salt Lake City or wherever the next PyCon or DjangoCon is being held. It could be their smaller conference. It could be their meetup. It could be the difference in like a meetup having funding to have a Zoom room or a Discord or whatever. I'm a part of the San Diego Python community. We do like I'm an organizer there, and like we have a live stream that we set up. We have a Discord channel, and we have like actual equipment. And a part of that is a lot of the concerns that we have are covered by the PSF. So like we have a budget. We have like there's a bank account. I don't have access to any of that stuff, but like it exists. And like that's how we're able to sit there and have conversations and say, we want to make our meetups more accessible, our conferences more accessible. And the only way we're able to do that is because we have people at the PSF that are also pitching in and helping out, with some of the other things. We had a really good conversation about trademark enforcement, which I know that sounds like the most entertaining topic ever. But stuff like that matters. And if you don't do it, then you get more issues down the road. Like I say all of that to say that like the donation that you give isn't necessarily like just going to PyCon. It's not just going into someone's salary. It's going to build a better, stronger community. And like, that's super important.
Yeah, I mean, so I've organized a good number of events, conferences and meetups, and I've been on the receiving side of grants from the Python Software Foundation a number of times for things like right wanting to bring right, live captioning to a conference, right? That's uh, a cost you have to commit to upfront, and it's rightfully not not like a rounding error cost. It's skilled labor um, doing difficult captioning work with like super jargony uh, conference talks, and so um, a lot of the time having these sorts of grants programs available lets a conference, push um, push their offering, a little further, right? And grow each year, as opposed to not knowing, well, are we going to get all of the sponsorships we're expecting?
Yeah. And I mean, also, I mean, we talked about this a little bit a few episodes ago with, kind of doing the Django Con recap and things like that. But when conferences started going back in person, one of the things that they realized was that to do that, you had to then say, okay, how do we create the accessibility of being able to be online and have anybody visit, anybody attend, regardless of where you live. And what happened was the cost actually went up. So like giving a virtual conference when you're not giving an in-person conference is, I'm not going to say cheap, but it can be done in many different ways. Giving an in-person conference and adding that virtual component to it is incredibly expensive and incredibly hard. It is a difficult task that you don't necessarily need developers to do this. You need video staff. Like DjangoCon had video staff on hand. They had captioners on hand. They had, and all of these things had to work together, and like they have to coordinate with the hotel and things like that. So then when you're doing all of those things, like the cost of operating a healthy, accessible conference is now more expensive than it ever has been before, because and I mean these are good problems to have because we're making the community more accessible, but that doesn't mean that just because it's a good thing to do that it's cheap. Like usually most of the good things to do are usually not cheap. And I think by design.
Yeah, I mean, you're it's not quite two conferences, but it's closer to running two conferences than it is to running one, right? You're people throw around this term, right? Hybrid conference, and some use it to mean, right, we're doing our normal conference and we also have a live stream, like that's the whole thing. But if you're really uh, doing it right, the way I would think is the right way to do it, um, you're building a full fledged online experience, in addition to the in person one, that is a little more familiar to a lot of organizers already. And I mean, more than anything, that it's right. That's a really like labor intensive process. There are a lot of people involved, and doing this uh, basically twice, doesn't make it any easier. So, uh, yeah, having like grants programs and things like that available uh, to organizers is super useful for. I mean, even just for the concept. I've talked about this with a bunch of conference organizers on various occasions, but like often you end up in this position of you have deposits you need to put down before you've been able to sell tickets, before you've been able to sign sponsors, right? There are, um, there ends up being this window of like you owe people money before anyone owes you money, and uh, those grants programs and other kinds of financial support are hugely useful, especially for right smaller events, with uh, like primarily volunteer staff, where you don't want to have people putting this on their personal credit cards.
Yeah, and I mean for me, like kind of my closing thought on this is just the the Python community is historically known for how do we how do we stand out from every other language. Like I don't think that the language itself is 100% the reason for Python's like exponential growth. Uh, the language is a good language. I mean, that's why we're all here. We all enjoy writing Python. Like that is a good thing. There's actually a really popular quote from Brett Cannon, who's long term Python community member, that says, "I came for the language, but I stayed for the community." So for me, like the the way that that continues to happen is that we continue to invest in that community. I know, like right now, there's a whole lot of conversation around where communities live, where people talk, where people congregate, where they do all those things. I'm completely amazed at how wonderful the Python community was for me when I felt like an outsider, like looking in. And now I feel like an insider looking in and being like, oh no, this is still great. Like, I'm glad that like I have the privilege to be able to go to Salt Lake City or I mean I live in San Diego, but like San Diego for DjangoCon. And like when I see these people here and I get to interact with them, I know that in part that is because of all the effort that has been put in to make a community that's worth doing more than just reading the blog posts and going on Stack Overflow and writing the code and going to the end of the day. Like the conversations I have with people in the community are absolutely valuable. They are like life valuable. And the PSF has in many ways worked to create more spaces for those types of conversations. So I'm thankful to them. So like again, I'm just one person. If that's what it takes to encourage you to say like, hey, $100, or as John's been saying, like have your company pay for this. Like make sure that they're sponsoring too. Make sure they're giving as much as possible to support this, especially if your company runs off of Python. If Python is like the key, is like a foundational piece of what you're doing to make money, continue to invest in it because that will only come back to you. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, John.
Yeah, we got a good question in the chat here from Kojo. What is the reason for the exponential growth of the language there? So I don't know if you want to rehash some
Everything,
of what you said.
yeah, no, everything that I threw out there. I mean, when you think of exponential growth, like we talk about this. I mean, John, you and I talk about this. Like I'm at least I'm a content creator. Like that is my job. Like my job is to be thinking about how I can reach the most people, hopefully for the least amount of money and effort. That's how my boss likes to, we measure those things. But some things aren't. Things usually don't happen because they were orchestrated. They happen because a lot of pieces fell together, and it kind of made sense. But to me, when I think of the Python community and like growth, like it's growth that, in my opinion, I think scares a lot of developers. Like we talk about how easy the language is to do. We talk about how people can go and not be a developer, quote unquote, and still like get their job done and build things using Python. Like when we talk about, Python code helped James Webb Space Telescope take pictures of the universe like never before. And I'm sure that there are other languages out there that contributed. Like I know that there are other languages out there that contributed. But what you hear is the Python side of it. What you hear are, data scientists, or not even data scientists, actual scientists, physicists, and like mathematicians and things like that, learning Python so that they can expand their knowledge. And because of that, what we've seen are concerns for the community that go beyond I'm a Django developer, or I'm a backend developer, or I do this one space. Like you have teachers that are like, I have to teach Python now. How do I do that? Or you have again scientists, mathematicians that are like, we have to care about that community. I watch people work on a digital like ham radio and like figure out how to do all of that. And they were sharing how like Python has made a community that started with Morse code like be able to expand and create ways to communicate with each other, and revolutionize something that's been happening for centuries. Like when you see that happening, that I only hear Python. Sometimes I hear Rust, but I mostly hear Python, like in the discussion for that space. But with that, you now have significantly more people that you have to manage and care for and think about and care about, and that changes the landscape of how you promote those events. That PyCon can't just be about let's talk about this new module of the week or whatever. Like you need a track for data scientists, you need a track for hardware. You like it becomes a little bit more complicated, and the only way that they do that is with support. And it's like I don't think that the hockey stick goes together in terms of like financial support and popularity. I think popularity shoots way up, and then like the financial support kind of keeps going on its little path. So the exponential growth is a thing that happens because of convenience, but the reason why it's not like a oh hey it grew and then it disappeared is because people find the language and they find the things that make the language beneficial for them both professionally and personally.
Yeah, and so I mean, we talked about um the PyCharm part of it, and the direct donation part of it, but I do want to also bring up the become a member aspect, right? So this is the uh, if you're going to donate $100 and you plan on donating this $100 every year, right? That's kind of the core of what the supporting member requirements are, and to be a member of the Python Software Foundation, um, there's not like a huge amount to it, but there is a pretty important part, which is the ability to vote in board elections, right? And so I think we talked about a while back on the show the board elections and the numbers of people who did vote in these, and it was on the order of 5 to 600 voters out of 15 to 600, 1,600 eligible voters, something in that ballpark. Um, and for a community the size of Python's, I think that's pretty small. And if you are right out there and you're saying to yourself, well, why doesn't Python prioritize X? Right? You've got a particular thing that you think needs to have more investment in it. That's one way you can get involved, right? I mean, voting is sort of the lowest bar there of um, if nothing else, you can go and you can cast your vote for that candidate that says, hey, this is a thing that's really important to me. The PSF should be doing more in this particular niche. And if you're not already a voting member, because there are a number of ways you can become one, this is a good opportunity for it, right? It's I want to say it's $99 um, to become a supporting member, and that's like a yearly contribution. So not a uh, it's not a large commitment for a lot of folks who do write Python professionally, at least in the context of like the the U.S. and tech salaries here, and there's a lot more to be said about that, but you know
that's
uh,
that's a longer conversation.
yeah, and if I'll also say, right, because I don't want to leave this out, right? if you do work to support, right, Python, the Python community, or various Python communities already, there is another membership type that uh, you can register for, that gets you the same kind of voting privileges without a financial donation. Right. So if you organize events, if you maintain you know Python packages that are open source, um, if you work on, right, news shows like this, there those all kind of go um, uh, into the umbrella of like contributing memberships, um, and there's again a pretty low bar of like, um, it's like 5 hours a month. If you're running a meetup, right, Jay, you know this. It's like that's a meetup a month, and you've more than met that goal, right?